Jordan Smith from the Center for Student Engagement to come up and say a few words.
Perfect. Good deal. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Good deal. My name is Jordan Smith. I serve as a coordinator in the Center for Student Engagement. I just have a brief statement regarding free speech at the university. So tonight's event, like Dr. Leonard mentioned, has been organized by a registered student organization for the engagement of the campus community. And as a public university, our campus is a marketplace of ideas. The university embraces debate and will protect the freedom of our campus community to vigorously discuss ideas. We ask that you respect the speakers, the students who organize the event, and your fellow students in attendance by allowing the speakers to be heard. University policy and state law prohibit substantial obstruction or interference with this event. Those who attempt to interrupt the speakers or otherwise prevent them from speaking will be asked to leave and may be subject to disciplinary action or legal action. Thank you for cooperation, and I hope that it's a great event. Woo!
So I have to say a few words by way of introducing the organizations as well as the event. So the Platypus Affiliated Society was established in Chicago in 2006 and now has spread to campuses from Berkeley, California to Jakarta, Indonesia, from Knoxville to Berlin. Platypus chapters organize reading groups and public fora such as this, as well as helping to publish the Platypus Review, the record of the organization's engagements in print. Platypus focuses on problems and tasks inherited from the old 1920s to 1930s, new 1960s to 1970s, and post-political 1980s to 1990s lefts for the possibilities of emancipatory politics today. It's concerned with exploring the improbable but not impossible task and project of clearing the ideological obstacles to the reconstitution of the international struggle for socialism. Our aim is thus self-education, self-criticism, and ultimately the practical reconstitution of the left. Here on UT's campus, Platypus has a number of upcoming activities. A weekly reading group on the history of revolutionary Marxism, Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. in HSS room 103A. Coffee breaks, where the organization informally discusses politics and ideas every Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. outside of Starbucks in the Hodges Library. This is a great place to get to know the organization and to ask questions about the project. Our open submission journal, the Platypus Review, is available at select businesses in Knoxville and also at our table just here to the left, to my left. Be sure to pick up a copy on the way out. I also want to call your attention to the book for sale, Marxism in the Age of Trump, which came out last month. Sign our sign-in sheet, which is circulating around the room, to get information about more events. Tonight's panel, No Nazis on Rocky Top, ? Anti-Racism in the Age of Trump, is our major panel for the year here on campus. There were several other organizations that were central to helping us promote the event and that we'd like to thank for their support. The Young Democratic Socialists, the Tennessee Anti-Racist Network, UTK Advocates for Social Change, the Mercy Junction Peace and Justice Center, Spread the Vote, and Allies of Knoxville's Immigrant Neighbors. Several of these organizations have their literature here on the table as well, and we encourage you to stop by and to pick up their literature if you haven't already. Tonight's panel follows up upon previous panels held elsewhere on the politics of anti-fascism and anti-racism, such as, among many others, a panel held on March 20th, 2010, at the Left Forum in New York City, on April 30th, 2013, in Frankfurt, Germany, on March 27th, 2015, here on UT's campus, and September 15th, 2017, at the University of Houston, among many others. Now, before I introduce the panelists, allow me to provide a description of the panel that we've circulated to each of them. Just over a month ago, on February 17th of this year, the day of the events in question, Rachel Ohm and Brittany Cropper reported as follows for the Knoxville News Sentinel. About 250 protesters gathered at the University of Tennessee's campus Saturday afternoon to speak out against a gathering by white nationalist group, the Traditionalist Workers' Party, and its leader, Matthew Heimbach. The event drew about 45 white nationalists to Dabney Buehler Hall. About 200 members of law enforcement from 4 different agencies were on site to monitor security at the event and the protests taking place. Unquote. Describing the protesters as a motley crew of students, faculty, and local residents that included both masked Antifa as well as libertarians wearing pins that said, "Socialism sucks," Ohm and Crocker go on to indicate the rather ominous twist taken in the recent debates over free speech on campus. Not conservatives, but bona fide fascists like Heimbach, who was centrally involved in the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in August 2017, were allowed to hold a rally on the state's flagship campus, despite the fact that no one at the University of Tennessee had invited the group to campus, nor did the speakers address students. As Ohm and Crocker write, no students were in attendance inside Heimbach's talk, which was planned as part of a recruiting effort. Apparently, the group was allowed to choose who could attend. Here is something seemingly quite different from, for instance, the University of California, Berkeley's failed Free Speech Week, which was to consist of a series of popular conservative speakers and writers. In light of this recent white supremacist activity at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, the Platypus Affiliated Society is hosting a conversation about how to address racism and fascism on campus and in society at large. We do so with an awareness that beneath the consensus of avowed anti-racism, the left remains conflicted about whether and how to politicize race, often placing its hopes in the Democratic Party to secure greater representation for minority groups. This at the same time that the Republicans attempt to address racial disparity through job creation. More specifically, since Trump's presidency, a politics of anti-fascism, reminiscent of the Popular Front of the 1930s, or of the Black Bloc politics of the 1990s, has been resurrected by the left. Questions this forum seeks to address include: how is anti-fascism the same or different today as it was in the days of the Popular Front against fascism in the 1930s? How is today's anti-fascism related to the more familiar strategy of leftist organizing around anti-racism? Given the recent focus on university campuses, is there potential for a new and renewed student politics today? And if so, how might this relate to the wider project of resuscitating the left? And finally, how does the sort of leftist politics we have recently seen on campus advance potentially the struggle for socialism and/or the development of human freedom? Each of the panelists has been asked to consider this description and questions in formulating their remarks. The guidelines for tonight are that each will have 10 to 12 minutes for their opening remarks, after which time there will be opportunities for brief responses from each to the others, no more than 3 minutes apiece. Then we'll open the discussion up to the floor Questions and comments are, of course, welcome from the audience, but please try to keep these a minute. If there are many of you who wish to ask questions, then I will take them in groups of maybe 3 at a time, and then ask the panelists to respond to all of them as they choose. Our panel will conclude at 9:30 p.m. sharp, and therefore at around 9:15, I will ask each of the panelists to make a concluding statement, some concluding remarks. Now, for our panelists. One of our panelists has had to, unfortunately, cancel. It's possible that she may yet be able to come. There was an injury to one of her children, and she's had to go to the emergency room. So we wish the best for her daughter, and we hope that Seema Singh Alvarez will be able to come, but it's possible she may not. In addition, we have Jordan Rogers, who is in the middle here, who is president of the UTK chapter of the Young Democratic Socialists of America. Jordan will be followed by Dr. Raja Swamy, who is a member of the Department of Anthropology here on campus. And finally, Chris Irwin of the Appalachian Anti-Racist Action.
Tea Party.
Tea Party will conclude. And so, if you join me welcoming all of our speakers.
Thank you. For many young people today, it's baffling to see and experience the reality of race relations around us. I personally was startled to see that the amount of casual racism and prejudiced beliefs aren't just stereotypes, and that people do genuinely hold them. At first, it's easy to ignore these people, believing that they don't represent the majority of views, nobody is going to listen to them, and then eventually it will go away. When we realize the full severity of the problem, and that many people in our community are genuinely racist, it can lead to disillusionment with the world around us and the people in our own community. Although what it should lead to is empowerment and motivation to remedy these evils. Living in the age of Trump, many young people are scrambling to figure out how to fight this hateful environment which has emerged around us. And I maintain that young people that find themselves disgusted by hate and bigotry will be the ones to act on what is right. It seemed like overnight the Traditionalist Worker Party had a presence on campus. When they started spreading their propaganda, putting up posters and vandalizing the rock, some common sentiments I heard from students on campus were, where did they come from, why are they here, and it's sad that we still have to have this discussion, which it is. That was repeated over and over again by students that were startled by the fact that the wave of xenophobia was spreading around them too, and not just confined to history books and news stories. Passive support of the students against the Nazis was exceptionally high, even if many did not take action against them. For many students, it was the first time they had been exposed to blatant prejudice, individuals or groups of people spreading hate speech, toting racist and fascistic symbols with the aims of dividing people and instilling fear. But the level of organization that revolves around blatant prejudice is growing alarmingly. That was a wake-up call for many about the need for real organization and militancy against these hate groups, which is one of the only ways to fight them effectively. Groups like the TWP may try and flaunt their ideology and talk about their own superiority to other people's, but at the end of the day, they are cowards. We see this over and over again with their tactics. Not only are they too timid to face us on the merits of their own beliefs, probably because their beliefs don't really have any merits, but many are afraid to openly admit their beliefs in public, instead choosing to operate in secret. And the few that do proclaim their open hatred in public are often punched by a good citizen doing their civic duty. That is often one of the best ways to fight these hate groups. If they are too afraid to organize, then they may not organize. That's what led Richard Spencer to declare Antifa is winning, and why he is cutting down and canceling his appearances in public. The more we normalize hate speech, the more racists feel comfortable spewing. The bottom line is, I don't feel bad if racists are too afraid to speak their mind. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. But there's a problem with this tactic. You often can't identify a racist just by looking at them. Even the classic stereotype about racists, that they're often just poor rednecks with poor views, isn't correct. All we have to do is look at the White House to see that racists and bigots can wear suits and look respectable too. We don't always know who these people are. They can be politicians, community leaders, businessmen, teachers, etc. We have to kill the idea that it's any one type of person that spews these hateful views. And the closer we get to that, the closer we are able to get to the root of the issue. But there is a danger in targeting specific people or specific organizations as the reason racism remains in the US. The reason is we have a system in place that is architecturally designed to discriminate against people of color and lead to their oppression. That is the institutional racism. While individuals may hold hateful and discriminatory beliefs, the structure of our institution is what actualizes those beliefs and systematically discriminates. This is why we see the African American community making up 34% of the prison population while only compromising 15% of the population of the US. This is why we see African American children being targeted disproportionately by police, making up 32% of all children that are arrested. In fact, according to the NAACP, if African Americans and Hispanics were incarcerated at the same rates as whites, prison and jail populations would decline by almost 40%. A white nationalist can look at those same statistics and claim, oh, minority populations are just violent, their parents didn't raise them right, they need more Jesus in their life. But that's simply not true. We see these narratives pushed over and over again. Minority communities are vilified and criminalized over arbitrary standards, and the narrative that these communities are violent gets perpetuated by those that just regurgitate what they hear on the evening news. There's that now famous quote by John Ehrlichman, who is a former Nixon advisor on domestic issues. And it's his way of explaining the philosophy behind the war on drugs. Ehrlichman says, "We couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities." He goes on to say, "We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." This displays why politicians, even today, push the same narrative. Because they're convenient, they make it easy to push legislation, and it allows for the masters of mankind, as Adam Smith would call them, to make more money and remain in power. It can be extremely profitable for politicians to subjugate people and incriminate minority populations. Right now, 37 different states have allowed for private companies to buy the labor power of inmates to increase production. Between just 1980 and 1994, the profit margin associated with these prisons went up from $392 million to $1.3 billion, meaning that all of those companies that invested in prisons made a lot of money off it. These prisoners are not required to make minimum wage and often make far less, with private prisons being the worst offenders over public ones. The highest paying private prison is in Tennessee, where inmates can earn a top income of 50 cents an hour. No wonder Jeff Sessions was so quick to reverse Obama-era mandates limiting private prison power. In fact, private prisons are booming under Trump. Core Civic and CEO Group, who own the majority of private prisons in the US, invested heavily in the Trump campaign, to no surprise, because they knew they were going to get two things from him: low regulations on their prisons and a steady supply of prisoners. This is a key element of institutional racism, the exploitation of marginalized people. There are far more examples of institutional racism than just prison labor. We could look at the way healthcare is distributed to minority populations, causing African Americans to have significantly higher rates of infant mortality, or the structural bias in access to education in schools with majority black populations, statistically higher teachers with less experience, and according to a Stanford study, are more likely to give harsher punishments to students of a minority. These issues are deeply embedded in our system, and ones that are not going to go away overnight. Our system may not even have the capacity to deal with these issues of institutional racism. But there are many evils that, as of today, we have to live with. But if we make no effort at all to change these institutions, then we are tacitly perpetuating that structural racism by participating in a system that encourages it. Institutions can be reasonably molded, with some limit, of course, so these evils can be alleviated and the pains can be dulled. One way to affect change is to be militant about our electoral politics, but as we all know, politicians are often unwilling to change because that doesn't keep them in power. The real way to affect change is to organize around an issue. We can take UT as an example. UT is an institution that has to protect itself and is not always on the student's side despite what they might try and claim. But students have a tremendous amount of power against the administration because we pay a lot of money to be here. If we force their hand on an issue, then they have to pay attention to us. And that's true of almost all institutions. When Heimbach came to UT, a lot of people were disgusted by the apathy that the administration had towards the issue. Students did their best to try and organize, but the administration still don't listen. I remember when the administration put on a ceremony at the Rock, some sort of ineffective showcase, people gathered around and painted their hands on it, and that very same night, the Traditionalist Worker Party came back and vandalized it again with their Nazi propaganda. I had hoped that the administration would learn from that experience that the Nazis are an actual issue on campus, but I doubt they learned that much because they still allowed the Nazis to come. I do, however, have more faith that the students learned more from that experience than the administration. Hoping that we could just sit by and let the administration fix everything was an idle dream, and next time students will have the knowledge to have the militant organization needed when facing these racists. The student body has a great deal of potential when we aren't nestled under the wing of the administration. Young people have been historically the ones to fight against injustice and make a stand for what is right. And on UT, a truly united student body standing in solidarity with one another is something that no racist individual, organization, or administration can challenge. Thank you.
Now, Dr. Swamy.
I'd like to focus attention on this idea of democracy and what it means in this day and age, and what it means both in order to help us understand what is going on with the rise of new forms of fascism, as well as to figure out what needs to be done. The age-old question for the left, what is to be done, requires first and foremost, I think, a much more patient understanding, patient kind of analysis and understanding of what the forces are that are at play. Fascist organizations and groups, definitely, as the left has known for a long time, do not arise out of nothing. They have very strong social bases, and they come from particularly spaces where their ideas that they espouse are receptive and have a following, they speak to audiences that tend to get what they're saying. So they are not merely, as many folks on the more mainstream left tend to think, dangerous people with dangerous ideas. These are ideas that are, of course, dangerous, but they come from spaces that are much more at home than most people would like to admit. I always find it interesting that it's the same students who kind of express astonishment at these various fascist entities approaching campus, or these kinds of events taking place, also bemoan the fact that when they go to Thanksgiving dinner, they have a hard time having conversations with that uncle or that particular cousin who espouses pretty much the same kinds of ideas. But what this leads us towards is trying to think about what is it about our contemporary moment that enables us sort of this very dangerous, but at the same time also seemingly normalized types of fascistic movements, not just in the United States but around the world. My own work is on issues pertaining to neoliberalism and the rise of right-wing politics in India, and I will share some observations about what is happening in India as a way to kind of help us maybe think about what we need to, what might be things to think about in the United States. India and the United States, both sort of the leaders and the dominant members of the these societies like to speak of their countries as large, important, trend-setting democracies. India is sometimes referred to as the most populist democracy. The United States, of course, the only real democracy in the whole universe, if one were to listen to the rhetoric. But they're also both of them also very interestingly majoritarian non-democracies. Just beneath the veneer of all of this talk about democracy, like very anti-democratic, non-democratic forms of governance, structures and practices of power. And so I'd like to kind of just go through a couple of things about what's been happening in India over the last 10 years or so, and particularly with the new government that is in power since the last general election of 2014. India is ruled by a Hindu right-wing government, led by a man who grew within, his own political career was within a movement that even by its own members is referred to as a kind of a fascistic supremacist movement, the RSS, which owes its origins to the era of the 1920s, when Indian right-wingers sought the advice and help of the Italian fascist government to set up a sort of parallel fascist project in India. The RSS emerged in 1925, inspired by Mussolini, but its leaders also very glowingly spoke of Hitler and Hitler's horrific actions during the Second World War. They spoke in terms of applying the example that Hitler was kind of setting in his targeting and extermination of the Jewish population. They spoke of applying that example to India's Muslim population. The RSS was decidedly a Hindu chauvinist, Hindu supremacist organization. One of the members of the RSS went on to assassinate Mahatma Gandhi in 1948, and thereafter the organization was banned for a couple of years, but strangely enough became unbanned and became quite mainstream by the 1960s and 70s as a quote-unquote social organization. By the 1970s, it had also established a political party that began vying for power, trying to contest power and wrest power from the hands of the dominant, dominant nationalist party, Indian National Congress, the party of Mahatma Gandhi, and the party that had ruled India for several decades. After an attempt in the 1990s, the party finally achieved a landslide victory in the 2014 election, bringing to power Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister of India. Now, what is interesting about this particular formation that perhaps echoes in many ways with the current Trump administration is its commitment to two types of politics. On the one hand, it is very, very unambiguously, fervently for a Hindu chauvinist, Hindu supremacist state. And this involves not only policy making, but also the tacit and active coordination with a very vast apparatus of movements that are part of the fascist movement that exercise various forms of extra-legal violence. And this extra-legal violence is something that I'd like for us to kind of think about in terms of our understanding of fascism. The extra-legal violence that we understand here has some interesting features. One is that it tends to work in coordination or in conjunction or with the sort of the nudge-nudge, wink-wink sort of response of the state. So the state is not particularly antagonistic to the extra-legal violence of fascist movements. That is an established fact in India. You see time and again mass violence against minorities, against people targeted by the Hindu right wing, usually elicits very little in terms of proactive defensive responses from the state. While at the same time the state empowers these very extra-legal movements by providing new avenues for them to exercise power. Most recently, in the last few years, there's been a crazy kind of upsurge in the so-called cow protection movement. I don't know if you're familiar with this stuff, but most people say, oh, people in India, they worship cows. Not exactly true, but cattle and cows have become a very, very important source of contention for the Hindu right, because the Hindu right likes to advocate this belief that Indians should be vegetarian, and first and foremost, Indians should never eat cow meat or beef. And anybody who is accused of eating beef can be set upon by mobs and lynched and killed. And this has happened many times in the last few years. Mob violence that's emboldened by the state or by the government now. You have officials who openly come out and speak about the importance of cows. The government of the most populous state in India, the Uttar Pradesh government, yesterday announced a new venture to bottle and market cow urine, apparently for medicinal purposes. At the same time that they slash medical budgets, health budgets, at the same time they attack educational expenditure, etc., etc. They are promoting these kinds of revanchist ideas. But the point here, the mob and the state are not antagonistic to one another. They work in conjunction with one another. The second set of commitments that I want to kind of point to here are neoliberal commitments. So the commitments that pertain to attacking the remnants of the welfare state, attacking the remnants of those kinds of allocations, those kinds of items in the budget that were meant for education, for health, for the welfare of the poor, subsidies for small producers, farmers, fishers, etc., providing avenues for entry into the workforce for marginalized, oppressed populations, various kinds of affirmative action. In India have been under virulent attack from the right wing for many years, but now with the government in power, they're basically enforcing these things through the law. So this commitment to neoliberalism results in, of course, as we are seeing in the United States today, a massive transfer of wealth. It's the acceleration of these transfers of wealth, and that's something to keep in mind also. Fascism did not introduce social inequality. Fascism did not introduce the kinds of rapid extraction of wealth from the poor and the marginalized and transferring up to the billionaires and the rich. Fascism has made that process much more efficient. Fascism enables the pursuit of these objectives while at the same time eviscerating the remnants of the social welfare state, at the same time eviscerating the post-colonial and the post-1940s assumptions about democracy, citizenship, equal rights, protection under the law, so on and so forth. And this is, I think, the critical moment we need to grasp is this combined, this tacit alliance that the fascist mob, the mob connotes unorganized, etc., but no, the mob is organized. It has a particular kind of structure, it has a particular kind of way by which resources are used, and the state which provides not only legitimacy for the actions of the mob, but utilizes the mob to advance its own interests, which are both on one hand supremacist in orientation and directed towards facilitating more wealth transfer upwards to the rich and curbing and pushing back against any form of resistance against those processes. So social movements are criminalized. Anybody who protests against whether wage cuts or whether it is attacks on the street, they are criminalized. Any kind of organizational efforts are criminalized. I just want to end with one small thing here. That's a very depressing picture. But I think in recent months, we're also kind of aware, it's not just recent months, but it's always been the case. The left will always fight back, and the left will fight back in new ways, and that is why we are the left. We will learn from our mistakes and we will fight back. Last week, there was a march of 50,000 farmers in India who marched from the city of Nashik, 200 kilometers by foot to the city of Mumbai. Mumbai is like the New York of India. It is the capital city of capitalism in India. It is where the financial markets are. It is the most important city in terms of money, wealth, and sort of new India. It is the home of Bollywood, if that makes sense. But these farmers marched, 50,000 of them, by foot, over 6 days, to Mumbai, went to the legislative, to the state legislature, assembled around the state legislature, handed a set of demands to the chief executive of the state, and got every single demand agreed to right there, from a terrified government that never expected this sort of response that can come from the very poor, the most marginalized. We have to draw sustenance and draw inspiration from these moments. A left that fights back is a left that has to think clearly and cleverly about the conditions that exist today. We can draw inspiration from older fights, but the fights of today are the fights of today. And others.
Y'all mind if I stand? Can you hear me in the back? Woo! All right. Friends, citizens, a couple of enemies, and I think one sock puppet Nazi that's here tonight. I can't believe I gotta talk about Nazis. Really? And if you think I'm exaggerating when I call Heimbach a Nazi, I invite you to look at Google Images and search his name, and you'll see Heimbach beneath swastikas, one giant flaming swastika. Now, the Traditional Workers' Party, I'm a little disappointed because I know when they spoke, they got their own parking garage. I had to park in the fort. What the hell, UT? They got their own police escort. They got to pre-screen the people before they came in. I don't know any of you people. I know what you're going to ask me. The Traditional Workers' Party, they're traditionalists. They're here to God and family. And they even proposed the death penalty for adultery, which is a problem for Mr. Heimbach because he got caught doing his stepmom last week. No, for real. He was in a trailer in Paoli. He was doing his stepmom, his wife and his stepfather were trying to videotape this member of the master race, proud member. He ends up strangling his stepfather unconscious. His stepfather has to grab the kids there, run to Walmart, and call the cops. And you know what these idiots put on their arrest warrants for their employment? White nationalists, the master race. And this was our guest speaker at the University of Tennessee. And not just the guest speaker, they didn't have to ride coach. The university, they gave them business class. We got a room, they got their own dang building. Climate-controlled classroom, pre-screened who got to speak. First guy, you were talking about the First Amendment. What a botched, screwed up version of the First Amendment that was. Really? I couldn't have designed a more screwed up outlook. A marketplace of ideas where bad ideas are supposed to be debated. And by God, when these guys are debated, their ideas come apart like tissues in a hurricane. But the university made sure, we're not going to have any debate here. They let them screen everybody and gave their own building to them. Gave them their own police escort. Meanwhile, alumni such as myself and students, we got to stand out in the cold rain. And not only that, they made sure we didn't get access to the bathrooms right in the hill, even though we paid for those bathrooms. But the thing that fundamentally pissed me off the most about it was this idea that that's what the First Amendment is. The right for a group of idiots to spout their insanity unopposed, undebated. And the university made sure that's exactly what happened. How dare they use the First Amendment in the same sentence as what the University of Tennessee did? As I stood in the rain that day, in the cold, with shelters above me that I helped pay for that I wasn't allowed in, while the Nazis put quotes from Adolf Hitler up there, I was ashamed of my university. But I was also ashamed of myself and other citizens that we thought this had any resemblance for the First Amendment. For the marketplace of ideas to work, we have to confront them. We've got to argue with them. We have to debate them. Because when we do that, their ideas come apart. Now, as far as punching them, I suck at violence, really. I'm not any that good at it. I'm old, I'm a little bit overweight. I don't think I'm going to do too well on that. But at arguing in public with idiots, I got some skills. I've been to about 25 anti-Nazi KKK rallies. I started in Newport, where the idiots burnt a cross in the black mayor's yard, and we humiliated them. We crushed them. Every single time we confront them in public, they lose. And they don't even lose. It's not like a tiny loss. They get humiliated. It's almost painful to watch. Because the thing is, the new Ku Klux Klan, we're pro-environment. I just gagged when I heard Angry Santa. That's my term for one of my favorite not KKK guys who's got a big beard. We call him Anti-Santa, Angry Santa. But they're anti-NAFTA, and they're anti-Gavin. They're a pro-steelworker. They're here for all of you proud people. But then you come up and you poke them just a little bit, and they lose it and start screaming crazy stuff. In Newport, I saw 3 corn-fed KKK members, and there was this little Hispanic woman comes up and goes, Jesus was a Jew and probably black. Bubba goes nuts, and there's national media, and in front of national media, you know what this fool says? Jesus was not a Jew. He had blue hair and blonde eyes and is related to Queen Victoria, and you can go to Westminster Abbey and see for yourself. That's a word-for-word quote. The 2 KKK members beside him start backing up, and they're like, Somebody tell Bubba to shut the hell up. That sounds crazy to me. And that's it. That's all it takes when the marketplace of ideas works, when we confront them, when we debate them, when we're there. The truth comes out. One time I walked up in Morristown, and I had this hat I wore that I kind of liked, but it looked a little funky. And they start yelling at me, look, it's Taliban. He's a Jew, Taliban Jew. And they start chanting, Taliban Jew, Taliban Jew. And I'm walking, at first I'm like, I like my hat. And then I'm like, wait a second, the Taliban's recruiting Jews? That doesn't make any damn sense to me. And that's the thing, every time you poke them and debate them, the crazy comes out, they can't help it. The only time they win is when we don't confront them, when we don't debate them, when we don't argue with them. We, at the beginning of our counter rallies, the neoliberals are always like, let's close our eyes and get on our magical unicorn and then just ignore them away. Ignore them away. And every time I hear that idea, I'm like, can you please point at a single time in history ignoring evil and hatred has ever worked? In fact, there was this guy called ML, his name is Martin Luther King. He said that when you're silent in the face of evil, you are not only complicit in it, you are as good as actively participating in it. Silence in the face of evil is complicity. It never works not to confront these guys. They love it when they're not confronted. You know why? They make their YouTube videos, and they recruit people. And that's what this is about. They're flipping rocks as quick as they can to see if they can get anybody to come out from the rocks to join their ranks, even 1 or 2 people at a time. When we don't confront them, they get the media. When we show up, bang, we still have the media. The crazy comes out. Once you poke them and the crazy comes out, just stand back. It's going to be on national media when they can't control themselves. That's why they counted on the University of Tennessee to insulate them. Insulate them against any image or any discussion or debate. Protect them from that. Because in the field of debate, they lose every time. When we don't show up and confront these fools, they march, and that's one of the problems. How much time do I have, by the way? Because as y'all can figure, I will talk for a long time.
You got about 2 minutes.
All right, I would just want to finish on one note. My first rally against the Ku Klux Klan, I stopped counting around 24, 25, and I'm an organizer, not an activist. I didn't help show up at these things, I helped organize them. But my very first one, I didn't go to. It was in Asheville. I was going to AB Technical College, and the Ku Klux Klan said, we're going to march through Asheville. And believe it or not, Asheville actually does have an African-American population. It's just really segregated. But I would see them in the mornings when I would ride the bus to AB Tech. We'd be on the same buses and stuff together. So I was like, well, they told me, oh, you don't want to be there, you'll give them energy. And I was like, well, I don't want to give Klan energy. I hate the bastards. So I didn't go. But I saw the video coverage it did. And 3,000 people from Asheville poured out on the streets and told these people, not in our town. This isn't the 50s. You don't get to march unopposed. My favorite footage was this little old woman and the Grand Dragons marching through, and she yells, I know him! And he's like, what? He goes, he hits on me in the 7-Eleven every single morning! And the dude's like, ah! But that's not what made me decide that this was something I wanted to do. It was the next morning when I got on the bus. Because you know what happened? The African Americans and people that were on that bus, something had changed. They were excited. The footage, the tape that runs in a lot of Americans' heads of the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis is the black and white footage of them walking through town and the terrified townspeople hiding. Overnight, their image of their hometown changed from that to a town where 3,000 people would show up and mock and humiliate them and say, not in our damn town. You are not welcome here. And that was magic. We can do that. It's not just that we can shut them down. It's not just that we can humiliate them and argue them to pieces to where they lose it and say crazy stuff. We can change we can change that footage. It's in people's heads, their perspective. That's magic. That's an opportunity. And we can only waste it when we don't show up, when we don't confront people, when we don't organize, and when we start fighting among ourselves rather than fighting with the true evil in our society. Anyway, I babble a lot. I burn up all my time, I suppose. I want to thank you all for showing up, by the way. They couldn't get half your numbers, hand-picked, hand-selected. They couldn't get half your numbers, and poor Matt. Poor Matt, he can't even come to the events anymore, show his face. They literally erased the Traditional Workers' Party's website in humiliation for what their fearless master race leader had done. Woo! Yeah. Anyway, thank you all.
Okay, now we're going to have brief responses from the panelists to one another, and after that we'll open it to the floor. So we'll go in the same order that they spoke. So first, Jordan.
There is one thing I want to say. I do agree that it's disgusting how much special treatment UT administration gave the Nazis. One thing to think about is if people did go to the protests and demonstrations while Heimbach was speaking, one thing that occurred to me is that UT must have spent an exorbitant amount of money just to protect all the Nazis that were there. If you look at all of the officers, all of the effort that went into protecting them, it's far more than they should have gotten in the first place. I can't even begin to think about how much they spent on just protecting those 45 people that shouldn't have been there in the first place. It is ludicrous that the TWP screened the people that went into the event. Because if you went onto their website to sign up to go there, you had to have a voucher from someone already in the organization that knew you. So you would say, oh, I know this person, and they'd say, oh, well then you're fine to come right in. That significantly limits, the free marketplace of ideas, which I'm all for the marketplace of ideas. But the one bad thing about it is that facing these beliefs every single time, coming at them and saying, oh, I'm going to debate these people, that gives legitimacy to their ideas. I don't want to live in a society where every day I have to go outside and debate with Nazis, fascists, and racists. I have far better things to do with my time. I'd rather be doing something constructive and instead of just arguing with people with hateful views. There is a need for militancy against these people, and there is a need for rational debate, but we have to find a mix between the two. That we're not focusing all of our efforts on just fighting these few fringe groups and people with poor views. That we can't try and build productive movements and organizations to fight other issues in our country that are so pressing right now.
About 10 years ago, if we heard a story about, and again I'll use the Indian example to hopefully speak to this, but about 10 years ago, if you heard a story about some Hindu right-wing fascist person saying something about the benefits of cow urine or the need to kill all the others, the responses to that would have been were very much dismissive. These guys are crazy, they're clowns, they're stupid, they're idiots. But today they're ruling the country. This is a country of 1.2 billion people, most of whom are now at the mercy of the policies and whims and fancies and idiocies of these very good types of clowns. So the people are promoting cow urine today in the driver's seat. So I wouldn't dismiss these types of movements offhand and kind of, it is important to mock our enemies, but it's also important to take them seriously because they are dangerous. And their danger is not something that, history has not provided us ample examples of. Hitler was also a kind of a clownish character in the 1920s. But by 1933, the very Germans who had dismissed him 10 years ago, including vast sections of the social democratic middle, the sort of the ideological spiritual ancestors of our social democrats of today, the Democratic Party or the Indian National Congress in India, dismissive, completely did not take these folks seriously. And soon enough, when these guys come to power, the social democrats who in many ways encourage that kind of mocking did not have a clue as to how to fight back. So I think it's important to mock them and to kind of to expose their shallowness, but we have to also simultaneously, and I think as events today are proving, not only fight defensive fights, but we have to be also constantly imagining and taking forward the positive fights. What are we fighting for? What do we want? We want socialized medicine. We want health care for all. We want education. We want rights. We want wages. We want equality we want an end to police brutality, right? What are we fighting for should be at the forefront of these agendas when we fight against these kinds of forces, because it becomes all too easy to mock the right wing. And we've seen again and again, Italy too. I mean, Mussolini was, a clownish character until he took power. And then, it was a different set of issues that had to be dealt with, which the social democratic middle was not equipped to deal with, because only through mass organizing and fighting back, through a kind of what is it for, what are we for, what do we want, that kind of a perspective only can produce the political momentum needed to fight back against fascist regimes.
Truth? You all want some ugly truth? We're being out-organized in some ways. We're better they're doing Twitter, they're doing Facebook, but they're also putting flyers up. Nobody does that among the left anymore. We've almost all disappeared into the electronic frontier. They're putting out flyers, they're doing a ground game, they're chalking. Billy Roper, one of their supremacy leaders, one of the tactics they do is they'll go 2 weeks before an action, protest, and they'll flyer a minority neighborhood with just like 5 or 6 really racist flyers. And then you know what they do? They call the media on themselves. Media comes out, takes a picture of these 8 or 9 flyers, and goes, "Oh my gosh, there must be thousands of these." The media post it. And then everybody on Facebook and the social media, it's called a force magnifier, takes it, puts it out, and they're turning 8 or 9 flyers into 10, 15,000 hits. They're chalking, they're adding, they're training. Here in Knoxville, I saw the post, Traditional Workers Party, they're doing fight clubs and beating each other bloody. They're practicing shooting. We know what their vision of the world is. They're practicing with guns. They're organizing. We're doing amazing jobs. We do these counter rallies like Murfreesboro and Shelbyville, where we show up and do amazing people from different movements come together, and we shut them down. They wouldn't even come to Murfreesboro. But we don't meet they have the Stormfront gathering where they're meeting once a year, and they're talking about, we got to lose the pointy hats, we got to lose the swastikas, we got to work the social media, we got to stick to our messaging. They're meeting at AMRED, which is the conference in Nashville, discussing the same thing. They're organizing on basically cell-based activity in individual towns where they're flyering and working together. I don't see that kind of organization happening from our end of the party. And that's scary. I mean, Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf, when he started talking about the Jewish problem, everybody thought they were insane. He wrote it. It was no mystery how he got to power. And he said we did it again and again and again and again. And I'll leave you with this final observation right now. We were just talking about the word Antifa, which has become almost a pejorative in a lot of society today. But that's from anti-fascist. And I got my letters from my grandfather that he was in the 63rd Airborne. That generation, over 400,000 Americans died hunting and killing Nazis. He was called Blood and Fire, his infantry division. They spread blood and fire through the Nazi ranks. Afterwards, he got sent to the Pacific Theater. And that was like 2 generations ago. 2 generations ago, over 400,000 American soldiers died fighting the Nazis. And now they're having meetings at the University of Tennessee. And the word Antifa, anti-fascist, the dialogue has gotten so out of control that it can be used as a pejorative from people whose grandparents fought and died against the fascists. And that's where we're at. We got to get organized. We got to run the ground games, and we got to take it seriously, because they are. Their ideas are easy to mock and ridicule, but they're meeting weekly. They've got a media sock puppet that basically publishes in Knoxville any of their promo pieces that come through. They're working a game plan right now. That's some ugly truth.
Very briefly, I mean, as much as we like to, sort of wish that these are marginal characters, I mean, let's also remind ourselves that a significant majority of the American population voted for Donald Trump. A significant number of white folks voted for Donald Trump. No matter how bad and how open his racism, his xenophobia, his hatred, his misogyny, his utter contempt for all of the things that most people would consider decent human values, his contempt for all of this, did not prevent a very large number of people doing this. A very large number of Hindus in India voted for Narendra Modi, who was very clearly complicit in and had a hand in, and in fact supervised one of the worst genocides in modern India. In 2002, more than 2,000 Muslim men, women and children were massacred under his watch when he was the chief executive of the state of Gujarat. His organizations were involved in the killings. His police force was involved in the killings. His civil administrators were involved in covering up the killings. He rewarded those who were involved directly in the killings. He rewarded them with state positions and went on to become Prime Minister of India. Right-wing sympathies are a systemic problem that we have to address systemically. We have to understand it in much more sophisticated ways. It is not the sum total of sort of the malicious intents of individuals, but it is the systemic ways in which these things manifest themselves and allow for the rise of these movements. Not every single German in Nazi Germany was an evil, hateful, bigoted, terrible human being. But the sum total of the kind of consensus lending kind of sympathies resulted in what is arguably the worst genocide of modern history. These things are systemic, and we must understand the rise of fascism in this day and age as a systemic phenomenon. Which leads us to then another set of questions, which is what are the antecedents to this thing? If Trump is cutting back all kinds of social spending and attacking with a vengeance various kinds of allocations for the poor, for social spending, etc., etc. He didn't invent this process. This started before him and was laid. The foundations of this were laid way back. One could look at the Clinton administration in the 1990s. There was the criminalization and incarceration of very large numbers of African American people. Was intensified in the Clinton administration. 3 strikes, you're out, and all the stuff came under Clinton. So let's not forget that there is a kind of a pathway to this, which, of course, not to suggest that there is no hope. This is a way to kind of develop a more systemic understanding of these phenomena, so we can fight this back systemically.
Okay, I now want to open up to all of you for questions. I don't think we need a microphone if you just speak up. So I see one question, the gentleman here.
For me, it's not more of a question, but it's just comment. It's all about what we're going to do to fight this movement. And throughout history, we know that young people are the ones who bring changes when it's come to real changes. And my disappointment, because I graduated from UT, I was with Chris, at a time that it was the good times when we have the anti-apartheid coalition in Tennessee, here at UT. My disappointment is that at the university, the students, we talk about anti-racism, we talk about all these issues of race, the issues of discriminations, and yet the students themselves are not united. They don't even talk to each other. Most of the events on campus are always white or black. And so in that sense, how could we talk about fighting racism if you guys cannot even talk to in the same place at the cafeteria, talking to each other? And without that dialogue, without that force, there is no way you can win the battle, because there is no organization. So you have all these pockets of organizations, but there's no unity. People don't talk to each other, don't have that engagement. And too bad that we rely most on the Facebook to get our news. Young people, of us. But I think it's more about what young people, you guys, as the students, what is being happening? What can you do to make those changes? Because the university is the most segregated place. Your fraternities are always white or black. Your sororities are always black or white. All activities except the football, people don't get together. So there is no dialogue going on among the students themselves to be able to stand up against what's happening. So that, especially for you as a student, what is happening?
No, I can.
Let's take a few more questions. Is there just one more here, or is there a hand that I'm not seeing? Okay, yeah, so one here and then over here. And then,
So I think we can come to the conclusion that where there is neoliberal policy, there is soon thereafter the rise of right-wing nationalism from the native peoples that are affected by that neoliberal policy. An example would be Russia in the 90s and the rise of the Putin regime, India, and I would say the Middle East as a whole, where we have this Islamic extremism as a response to neoliberal American foreign policy. And so, while this is true, at the same time we have neoliberals such as Hillary Clinton claiming to be the ones with the monopoly on anti-racism, anti-sexism in America. So where does the left stand then in the face of this, where the left in the United States has no media representation, we have no power whatsoever, and yet the left that has the antidote to this neoliberal policy is buffered out of power by the existence of these Democrats who are actually the ones pushing this racist policy. So what does the left do in that case?
and the lady up here, yes, you.
So this is probably, I don't know if this is great, but I'm curious about, in India specifically, what the role of militant left organizations are. Like, what do the Knoxvillites do? Do they have any impact on fascists in India, or are they really not relevant anymore? Like, I'm curious what that looks like. Like, what does the hard left look like in a way that's more effective?
Okay. Anyone who wants to jump in? Jordan, you've got something.
Addressing specifically the student issue, the first part of any element of organizing is that you have to get over the apathy that many people feel. Because to organize, the first thing you have to do is actually go out and do something. And that can be extremely hard for many people, myself included. One of the most common sentiments I hear from socialists is that, oh, I love being a socialist except the social part. I don't want to, actually go up and talk to people. I don't want to hand out pamphlets because I have to have that face-to-face interaction. It is something that is difficult to do. On a whole, students are mostly alienated from each other. We don't like that much contact besides, going to football games or just regular social events. But I think overall there is a large amount of solidarity between students in general. The main key is tapping into that solidarity and keeping it going. Because like I said, most students were implicitly against the Nazis coming on campus, because I don't think any of the 40 or 45 or so people that showed up at the Heimbach event were students. Most of the people on campus were staunchly against it. That was a moment of incredible solidarity between all the students to say, hey, these Nazis shouldn't be here. What we have to do in organizing is we have to tap into that solidarity, and we have to overcome the need to, we have to overcome the want to not actually go out there and get our foot in the door. When building that solidarity issue, it takes a large amount of effort, and not all students are willing to do that. But I believe with enough push and enough organizing, that more people will feel comfortable expressing their voices and seeing that these issues actually do change.
Go ahead.
We got to look at the problem first. I think KRS-One brilliantly called it miseducation. We've all been miseducated. We come from hierarchies. Our families aren't democratic or egalitarian. They're usually hierarchical from the dad down to the dog. Our places where we work, they're hierarchical as hell. They're dictatorships. We don't vote for our bosses. Hell, in school, elementary school, high school, I didn't get to pick my classes. I got told where to go, sit in a line. We are miseducated and in these hierarchical organizations most of our lives. When you think about it, most Americans have very little experience in actual democracy and egalitarian relationships. Then we throw them together for an hour a week and we say, all right, work together now. Now's the time, do it. And what's interesting is, we do. It just takes work and time and effort. It's not magic. We do overcome a lifetime of what KRS-One calls miseducation. We've got to get together, work together, do things together, and we've got to put our swords down. Man, the left fights with each other over intellectual bullshit. We fight with each other over minor matters. I think we could all be getting rounded up in camps, and we'd be fighting with each other on the trains if we weren't careful. I once heard a quote about Masada, and the guy told the Roman soldier, he goes, look, you want to destroy us? Leave us. We'll be at each other's throats in a year. And we got to take a cold, hard look at our backgrounds and where we're coming from. It's not an accident that we have trouble doing this, but just as primates, we should be better at working together. We're a naturally cooperative species that has been educated out of that cooperative nature. But when we do it, it works. I've seen it. It takes months, but I've seen people. When the community forms, it's powerful what we can do together, but it serves the interest of the state and the oligarchs when we do not, when we fight one another. And I think we got to take a cold look at that and realize, we're all coming from backgrounds that weren't particularly egalitarian, but we can do it. But it's not going to be easy always, and we do have to meet and talk. And occasionally we got to realize reasonable minds can differ. I doubt anybody agrees with probably 50% of what I'm thinking right now. But I'm here about the 50% that we do. And we got to look at it. And KRS-One had it right. Miseducation. That's what we're dealing with when we're having these troubles. But we have done it and we can do it.
But just by way of trying to address the question you asked, and then I will kind of try to sort of address I would say, so several decades ago, most of us in this room, black folks, brown folks, women, would not be in this room. We would not have been here, neither as participants or as teaching faculty or students, etc. But the fact that we are here speaks to something, right? That we are here not, again, one is we could read this as, it's the politics of inclusion that resulted from the civil rights movement. But we could also read this as a positive assertion of marginalized people to the right to be here. Like, this is ours too. Right? We can read history in both ways, and we should in fact read it more along the second lines, right, of politics of action. So when we think about, like, for instance, when Nixon's man, the quote you read, what were these guys responding to? They were responding to not just their sort of hidden hatreds and prejudices, but they were responding to what was seen as the threat of a politicized African-American movement that was changing the very fundamental ways in which white supremacy worked by contesting the material claims of white supremacy to monopoly over the state, to monopoly over education, monopoly over health, monopoly over rights as citizens. We too are citizens, we too have a stake, and we want this. Right? The pushback against civil rights is, in fact, part of the strategy of the pushback against civil rights was criminalization, incarceration, and recreating racism along different lines. It's not the racism of the 50s, it was the racism of the 1980s. Right? Family values type of racism. Right? One points to culture and this and that, instead of the older racism, which was much more blatant. But when we think about how neoliberalism works in this context, in both the Indian case as well as in the United States, one sees neoliberalism following on the coattails of a long period of, or at least a sustained period of assaults on the remnants of the social welfare state. Right? And these assaults started with the Social Democrats. It's not an innovation of the right wing. The right wing is more efficient at fulfilling it because the right wing can resolve one particular quote-unquote problem, the problem of resistance. And here I think you see that to fight back means not simply invoking, going back to, let's go back to the 1990s and the Clinton era kind of markers and registers of what it means to be a democracy, etc., etc. That too is inadequate. And one asks, how do we speak with the Democrats, right? We must always speak with them, no doubt, but from the left, from their left. We cannot leave the struggles of today in the hands of those who say one thing and consistently, without fail, do the opposite. Who speak the language of populism but make deals with the billionaires. Who speak the language of emancipation and equality but make all kinds of concessions with white supremacist conceits and white supremacist agendas. And we should be able to call them out without any fear. And to that, in that regard, Steve, I kind of would say, like, we need more argument. We have to have argument. Only through more argument will the left actually become the left. We are constantly being thrown under the bus by all kinds of, wishy-washy, middle-of-the-road players who come out there and speak in terms of the big tent and let's all get together. But as soon as the real kinds of issues crop up, they're nowhere to be seen. Which is why Black Lives Matter is so important. Because it comes from its own space. It comes from an autonomous space. It was not the product of the Democratic Party. It didn't come because of the blessings of some liberal establishment. It came straight from the heart of where people are experiencing the worst kinds of violence against the armed state. And it is speaking in the language of a resistance to the armed state. It is not speaking in the language of, oh, be nice to us. It's speaking in the language of, you put an end to this. We're not going to sit down until you put an end to this. And that's the uncompromising character of a revived left that we need to invoke and draw inspiration from.
I'll ask a question and then just to pick up on this question of the Democratic Party. This was in a sense in the description when we asked about the Popular Front against fascism, right? When the Communist Party subordinated itself, submerged itself into the Democrats in the 1930s. And this is where I raise the issue of arguing. At that time, there was a leftist party, for all of its problems, that was supporting the Democrats. Now there's no leftist party whatsoever. And so we can argue and we can criticize them from the left, but the Democrats are the only game in town at the level of power as far as the left is concerned. And that's a very real problem. And it's one that I think young people are more aware of, actually, than was the case in the days of anti-apartheid solidarity and the like. And we do have the experience, of course, of the anti-war movement electing Obama. And I think a lot of the anti-racist and anti-fascist sentiment very much runs the risk of electing a Democrat and running into the sands. That whatever energy or whatever moment there might be after the election of Trump really will do nothing more than elect a Democrat who's very likely to be farther to the right than the most recent Democrats. And so I guess I wanted to sort of just amplify and pick up on that question a little bit because it does echo part of the panel description.
Having mentioned Donald Trump, as an anarchist, not a commie, I got a different perspective. In the 30s, they rounded us up in the Hobbs Act and put us in camps, so we were in a little different position in the 30s. But in terms of Trump, from an anarchist perspective, the Republicans and Democrats look largely the same to me. We used to say different puppets, same masters. Okay, Aristotle talked about democracy. He wrote an essay about it. He hated it, but he had to write this essay apparently. And he said that essentially democracy is a product of class warfare. What happened was in Athens, democracy is a Greek word, go figure, the oligarchs controlled everything. They could hunt people. They owned everybody. People rebelled, demanded basic rights, and then guess what happened? Over time, the oligarchs began taking control again. So the people rebelled and demanded even more rights. The oligarchs began taking over the democratic institutions. The people rebelled and demanded even more rights. There was a series of about 8 of these revolutions. And it was through these revolutions this concept we call democracy came from. I think that old definitions of fascism came from Mussolini, and it was the idea of the combination of state power with corporate power. He even put together a specific corporation for it. What happened was the oligarchs, they basically, made it the law. That was what it was, a combination of the two. Now look at where we're at right now. If you assume we're in a democracy and we take Aristotle's hypothesis that there's a period in a democracy that's a pre-revolutionary period where the oligarchs gain control of the state until it gets so bad that people have to rebel and demand a more egalitarian society. That opens up some interesting questions like, what does a more egalitarian society look like? But also, where do you place ourselves on that right now? How I put it sometimes is, if you imagine democracy as your car that some hoodlums stole. In the past, under Obama and Clinton and the rest, they had the courtesy to hide your car. They kept it in their garage. Under Trump, the oligarchs, the 1%, they're driving your damn car in front of your house, blowing the horn. We got your car now! They've taken the smiley face off the fascism. At least before, we got a damn smiley face that the corporations owned our government, special interests controlled everything, Congress was a millionaires club. That really, they moved the furniture around between the Democrats and the Republicans. But that's a fundamental truth, and I think it explains why so many Americans don't vote. Because it's like we get our choices. Friendly fascism straight up under Trump, or the smiley face over top of it. And that's sort of the anarchist perspective from my viewpoint, is right now what we're doing is talking about moving the deck chairs around, but the people, the corporations that are running our civilization and democracy over a cliff like lemmings, as long as they stay in control, I think they would dump Trump in a heartbeat as long as they keep in control. They'll give us our smiley face as long as they can stay in control. We have a more fundamental problem that goes beyond Democrats and Republicans. It's a problem of a democracy that has been hijacked for special interest, which explains our current military posture. If we'd elected Dan Genghis Khan president and said, conquer the damn planet, he would be horrified by our current military posture. Multiple conflicts with fuzzy end goals is the cancer of empire. That is one of the clearest lessons of military history. Our current military strategies make no damn sense except one type of sense. That's dollars and cents. It's helping the military-industrial complex. They're loving turning Marines' bloods and little brown people's blood into dollars and cents for themselves. They're wrecking our military policy. They're destroying our environment. It's all symptoms of the same disease. Fascism, or what used to be in the dictionaries in the 50s, the combination of corporations and state power. And I would leave you with this question. If that's where you would place ourselves in that continuum, if you believe Aristotle's hypothesis that that's what happens in a democratic revolutionary cycle, A, where would you place us today? And B, where would you want us to be at the other end of the next American Revolution? I don't know if I answered anybody's question with that. We got questions now.
If you don't, you can respond.
I just wanted to just add one small thing. Just one thing. The example I shared with you of the farmers marching into Mumbai. 50,000 of them, rural people from very, very poor villages, having suffered terribly. You might have heard, some of you might have heard about the spate of farmer suicides in India over the last 15, 20 years. Hundreds of thousands of agriculturists have literally killed themselves because they have been pushed into the edges by the neoliberal kind of policy that have destroyed agriculture. Now these folks who marched those 6 days by foot came to the city, and they slept. Every day they slept under the open sky. They slept on the street sides and so very humble conditions. They march into the city, and the corporate media, the first 2 days, completely ignore them. They say nothing, but then as they start approaching the city, photographs start flying around of thousands of poor farmers wearing red caps and waving red flags, marching towards Mumbai. Suddenly they take notice. And all of a sudden, there's a lot of buzz going on in Mumbai city about, oh, the farmers are coming. But what happens is really fascinating. They were to arrive by nightfall in the city, and the next morning they were to march from a campsite where they camped in the city to the legislature, and that was the plan originally. But the city of Mumbai's students had 10th grade examinations, sort of across the board. All the schools conducted examinations at the same time. Had 10th grade examinations the next morning. So the farmers announced to the people of Mumbai that they will conduct a march at night, in spite of the fact that they were tired from having walked all day. They still marched at night quietly in order to enable the students to not face any kind of traffic hurdles on their way to writing their exams the next day. Now this single move completely endeared this movement to the people of Mumbai. And it was quite amazing to see hundreds of people, ordinary working class folks in the city, come out with food, with water. In some cases they were throwing flowers on the farmers as they were walking by. Right? This is solidarity. Solidarity is when the teachers in West Virginia went on strike, even when the union folks were telling them, hey, back off, we'll make a deal. They said, nah. These teachers were packing lunches for their kids every day because the kids are among the poorest and the most needy kids in the state, and they did not abandon their children. That is solidarity. These are spaces where new politics emerge, and to answer your question, I mean, how can campuses be sites for new student politics? I think it is through struggle. It is only in context where material conditions that bring people together in common struggle. Those are spaces for solidarity. Those are spaces for solidarity when people are fighting back against the decision to privatize campus facilities, pushing out workers in this campus who work for decades, whose lives depend on this work. When these movements stand in solidarity with other movements to push back against racism, against sexism, against misogyny, when these kinds of coalitions develop, there are real tangible things that people are fighting for. Again, fighting for stuff, right? And that brings people together, and that can create the grounds for the new solidarities that we need.
One thing I feel inclined to say as a reformed Democrat myself, I'm not one anymore, just to make that very clear. The Democrats often do brand themselves as the only ones that care for social justice or these things that we are fighting for every day. But my only question is, what are they doing right now? Because the Republican and the Democratic Party are often two sides of the same coin. And when you flip that coin every so often, I call that false democracy. Because democracy is not every 4 years you suddenly see a bunch of ads for electing your next president. Democracy isn't just, oh, every so often, maybe you go out to vote, maybe you don't, maybe you just complain. That's not democracy. And I think a lot of students realize that because they see these issues around them and they want to do something, but what do? They go to the Democratic Party, they don't really care. Like, what is the Democratic Party doing right now? Are they trying to better the lives of everyone? Are they organizing to bring down this racist administration? No. They're biding their time a few more years until the re-election comes around and they can say, oh, we're on your side, we can do this for you, just vote us in power. It's not going to happen. Even if the Democratic Party does try and do a few things, that they try and push universal health care, any of these things they could try and be doing, it's very limited because they're still working within that system that breeds these injustices, and they're still promoting that false democracy that's going to keep us all confined.
Okay. And I encourage you to raise your hand if you have a question, because this may be our last round of questions. Okay, here.
Yes, I just wanted to add to what George was saying about the inefficiencies of the Republican and Democratic parties. People need to start running for office. I'm actually running for the U.S. House of Representatives right now. I was running as a Republican who supports Medicare for all and the living wage, and they were going to move me off the ballot. So I refiled to run as independent. We can't work within the two-party system anymore, There are so many people in here that would be great for office. One person I would love to see run for office is sitting right beside me. So there are plenty of people who can do a lot more than just organizing and talking amongst ourselves. It doesn't work anymore. You've got to stand up and run. It's very hard though. It's the toughest thing I've ever done. So you've got to build up a good support system for that. Speaking of, if you'd like to talk to me after this, I've got some flyers with information about myself. Again, my name is Mark Whitmire, and I'm running for the House of Representatives. And again, I think each and every person that's in this room probably has what it takes to run and to get elected and to actually do something in our democracy. Thank you.
Anyways, while this whole time when I was trying to structure my question appropriately, he kind of touched on this inside of this whole debate, kind of riled me up a little bit. But pretty much, like the question approaching the Democratic Socialists, you others can touch on it. But when you're talking about the best salvation for students was to organize on this issue, on the Nazi issue, or whatever, and against the community structure, as we are paying them and we have presence. And then how you also touched on the institutional issues with how like mass incarceration, drug legalization, and also and how that's devastating, and also the economic inopportunity that these individuals have in terms of making a better life for themselves. Also, and those are the effects. But I would also like you said earlier, to look at the causes too. How you can also see whether it's, which is the main running theme with the finance, with the finance in the system, with how like even the prison sector themselves are lobbying millions on millions and millions to keep marijuana delegalized and keep it as a grade 1 substance to devastate these minority communities, and also how doing a merit-based school system, where some people in these that are economically impoverished could see if I can get like a 3.5 or like a 20 ACT, I can get like we can do these issues against the college structure against these committees, as we are a state college of the state, that these economically impoverished minorities or whoever, like merit-based system, they're able to get in for, they're able to afford it and be able to get in here as they did with work in high school. But pretty much what I was getting my point to before I labeled off is, as you see these causes from the finance sector, is you get like huge leaders of the Democratic Party, whether it's Nancy Pelosi or there's a similar politician in California. I forgot how to say the name, but they're all saying really loudly, like unite the left, limit the internal debate, and also try to drag over from the right that's been alienated from this Nazi party, kind of go over the middle spectrum and kind of draw these conservatives that are alienated from this radical right, and try to move the spectrum over from even more center. My thing is that neoliberalism, or whatever, many could argue that it created an apathy that led to the emergence. It created an overall apathy that led to the emergence of this right-wing thing to take over. And also how that very saying to unite the left and move center for these conservatives that are alienated from this Nazi group, and using an umbrella term like you said, how that also sways away from trying to get legislation from this finance reform, and for this mass incarceration, and for these institutional racist problems that are devastating minorities and preventing prosperity for these minorities. Should we do this cloud spectrum and move away from left politics and try to get everyone just to unite, to make everyone unite against this one elitist a radical right-wing party, or should we instead of the cloud, try to move over, and instead of that neoliberalistic cloud, try to solve these institutional issues while also creating enthusiasm for the rally against the right, instead of creating a cloud for the conservatives and try to go to a completely moderate goal to try to shroud everything and be completely avoid against these institutionalist controls. And that's it.
How many questions do I have here? Can I see the hands again? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Let me take 2 more, and we'll have as quick responses as we can, and then we'll take another round. So this lady here.
Okay. Going back to Dr. Saul's question from earlier, and also back to our discussion on neo-Nazis on campus, I think within this discussion, it seemed like there's this idea that UT students aren't really racist because they didn't show up to the TWP rally. And I feel like it's kind of an allure to like pretend that they would have to show up there in order to prove themselves as racist. You can be in your frat house and be as empowered as you want to be. So I think the conversations about race and anti-racism are being directed to the wrong places, first of all and foremost. So I feel like this inward talking that we're doing is kind of backwards. We all understand anti-racism. The conversations need to be had with people who don't want to talk about anti-racism, not those who want to come into the room. And as a Black woman, I feel like I shouldn't be held responsible for teaching white people about racism. So where is the accountability from our white student body, our white faculty, the people who are here and in power? Where is that action?
So I still don't have a specific question and kind of quick comments since we are running out of time too. So in my understanding, any sort of crisis rebuilds society or rebuilds the system. So crisis also creates opportunities for us to see actually what is going on in the name of liberal politics or conservative politics. So in this case, like many of you are referring to the potential of left politics. So my question would be like, do you guys think that we should stop railing behind Democratic Party? Because all sort of, this is my understanding, because anytime when we reap any benefits by putting ourselves in the street, by resisting, these benefits are reaped always by the liberals. Even though eventually they do nothing at the end, to make a progressive politics meaningful for the people. They never do it. So my question is I think we need to probably extend and build up our imagination, who we need to trust in the first place, who we should stop trusting in the first place. Because the kind of crisis we are facing right now, they didn't fall from the sky. It's a system-generated crisis. System-generated crisis, we should stop trusting the system in the first place that produced the crisis in the first place. So I think that what would be space for young people, to go for a meaningful politics. Don't tell me that it is Democratic Party. I don't want to believe this.
No, I ask you guys to exercise real restraint so we can have another round and responses to one another. So just a minute and a half each.
I want to thank you for raising that point. I think it's very important. Many of us, when this thing was announced last August of a rally around the Confederate monument organized by the right wing, many of us, faculty and students and members of the community of color on this campus, were quite torn about what do we do, and we asked the same question. It's probably time for white folks to step up, right? And this is based on conversations I've had with so many of my dear friends and students and colleagues. this is a problem of what I earlier pointed out, kind of use this long word, majoritarian non-democracy. Coming from a society where majoritarian values, and especially within the Hindu community, are almost tacit and they're part of the common cultural common sense, right? I mean, a lot of these folks, when they go to Thanksgiving dinner, again, Thanksgiving dinner is when all those unpleasant conversations happen, particularly in 2000, after the election of Trump. That was probably one of the most awkward Thanksgivings for a lot of white folks, right? Because you go home and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to talk with these people. But the thing is, you have to talk with them. You have to argue with them. Uncle is not going to kill you. He may not like you, but he's not going to kill you. You have to piss him off. And you have to get rid of those connections. I mean, family is nice and everything, but let's not buy the conservative nonsense that family is sacred and given to us by heaven. Okay? Because family is also should be held to the same standards and values that we hold dear as human beings. If there is no love or respect for humanity, then maybe that person is not really, worth putting up with. And I think it's time that people in the majority communities who are seeing this need to do their homework, and they need to step up those arguments and those conversations. No, Dad, that's wrong. No, Uncle, I don't really care what Rush Limbaugh said. It's bullshit. We should be able to say that, right? We should be able to say that and to speak that, and speak truth to power within those spaces. To back off from that is the worst kind of way to express any kind of solidarity. And I think a lot of people are faced with that. Oh, there's a march happening. I'm not like them, and I'm going to stay away. That's not enough. Go out there and confront that. Right?
If I may, just to add one thing. I mean, to turn that around, isn't the conversation also about Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party?
As well.
I mean, it does seem to me that it's a big mistake to argue that conservatism is restricted to the white community, which I don't even believe exists. I think that we have to be very careful about what this gentleman was talking about, which is the segregation of the left, I think, is a real issue and a pitfall. And I don't think that anybody's family is devoid of conservatism that I've ever known. Leftists, in my experience, are pretty rare. And I've met very few red diaper babies, at least Tennessee, of any kind. Communists or anarchists.
One of the common threads we got at the anti-protest I've helped organize from the neoliberals is we need to step back. We need to let the African American community, the Hispanic, the immigrant community step forward and take the lead against these guys. And I thought about it for a bit and I was like, wait a second. There ain't no brothers or sisters under those hoods. Those are white people. And they're there saying they're there to protect white people. And they're killing people to protect white people, but you want me to say conveniently, oh, well, I got to step back. I got to let the people they want to kill get in front of me. Yeah, you got to do it. That's just not my responsibility, But there are no brothers or sisters under those hoods. They're our responsibility. I'm a little uncomfortable with, we're kind of pink up here. And the whole idea that we were going to be talking about racism, I was like, well, we're all guys and everything, but there are no brothers and sisters under those hoods. They are our responsibility. These fools are willing to kill, burn churches, murder, to say they're there to protect us. That's why we've got to be up there. We've got to confront them. They're our responsibility. Once again, there are no brothers and sisters under those hoods.
There's this sort of conservative myth that I've seen perpetuated for a good few years now. I think it was Bill O'Reilly or one of those Fox News talking heads that claimed that I think the exact words were racism is dead, and they pointed to the idea that you don't see the Ku Klux Klan walking through the streets anymore lynching people, therefore there's not a problem in America. Of course, that's completely false. The idea that again, that white people should take a step back and let these minority populations decide their own fate. I would agree with to an extent that white communities do need to work with these marginalized groups, but we have to understand there's only so much that we can do fracturing ourselves. Instead of letting one group of people take over and take the reins and control everything, is fine. But we have to realize that there's only so much we can do if we're not united and we're not supporting each other in these movements. Because if we are this fractured and we want only a certain group to deal with a certain issue, nothing is ever going to get done. We have to work together, we have to open up the discussion together, and the longer we're unwilling to do that, the more these issues are just going to get perpetuated and nothing is ever going to get done. We can bicker all day about who should do what, but then we should be doing what we can with who we can with the tools we do have.
Okay, last round of questions. Any here? The lady here. You? Yeah, no, you? Yeah, you?
Oh, yeah, I had a comment. I agree with everything you said about DNC and neoliberalism, but I also feel like there's kind of on the left, it seems like we end up pushing back against people who are not as left as we are, and there's this competition to be the furthest left of anybody that you know. And it alienates people who are maybe in moderate or centrist, who are making leftward push, who are moving toward the left. And I just feel like we should welcome that and be in solidarity with that. I mean, there is a real struggle within the Democratic Party right now. However hopeful you think that struggle is, those people are really fighting a good fight, and I don't think it's right to paint everyone in the Democratic Party with the same brush.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up about the fact that Trump capitalized on pulling in a lot of white working class voters and used the racism to divide. It's been done for 400 years, and usually in the conversations that I have with them, I keep telling them you're being duped because I'm a socialist, committed socialist. We're all working class that I'm fighting for, and no matter what shade of color your skin is, you're being duped by the Mercer people that are trying to divide and conquer. They've done it for hundreds of years. Trying to help these folks see you're being duped. And looking at Trump right when he got in office, look at what he's put through the cabinet. Has that really helped you? Carrier people, your jobs are shipped to Mexico. These folks, and trying to help them see you're being duped such that, I don't know if you know who Miles Horton is, but he would go in the 30s and organize labor rights and unions. And he sat down with all the races and he said, if you don't fight together, you're going to fall down together. And I think it's the only way we can win these folks over.
Okay, quickly. If you had somebody who identified as right-leaning, a conservative, a Trump voter, someone in the room with you, I think it's highly probable that they deny being racist or misogynistic or ignorant or backwards. Rather, they're concerned about, they would say they're concerned about their jobs, they're concerned about free speech, they're concerned about certain things. How do we feel about believing them? How do we feel about treating them as victims of the same capitalist system? How do we speak to their real concerns?
I'm going to defer to Ethan.
Last question.
I just wanted to support what he was saying about 400 years of racism being used to divide and conquer. There was I think it's called Nat Turner's Rebellion during the slavery period, and it was sharecroppers and slaves who rose up against the plantation owners together. And in response to this, they instituted slave codes. And then what your question just now, the answer to that question is because our policy on the left would help those people.
Yes, it is my contention that behind every bad attitude is a real political concern, and I want to know how a left would speak to those.
And if you don't mind, Spencer, I'm going to add real quick. This is really not so much a question as an observation. Let's just also be clear about the nature of racism. It emerged in tandem with the emergence of capitalism. And what should we say about that?
Okay. And I'm going to ask that you combine your concluding statements with your responses to the question. And each one of you has 3.5 minutes.
So I'll try to be very brief. I mean, for one thing, I mean, again, this also kind of is it's not the same thing, but it's somewhat similar to mocking the articulation of what are, very offensive and extremely stupidly problematic opinions, no doubt. Mocking it is not the solution. I think two things. One is, demonstrating how through example, through illustration, what exactly is happening in this process. Do you know, for example, that your, interests and those of the ones who speak for you are actually not just dissimilar, but in contradiction of one another? The same guy who says you're white, you should, we're on the same side, he kills your health care, right? I mean, to get at those contradictions is critical for the left, but to get at those contradictions requires an engagement with material realities as well, right? It is one thing to be outraged by the sheer audacity and the idiocies that these guys come up with, but it is another thing to actually provide a material critique of existing realities, to propose an alternative, right? To say that your ideas are stupid, you're watching too much Fox News, this is what's going on, right? What you think of as, protecting your borders is really about doing all kinds of terrible things, which completely do not address any of your anxieties, which your anxieties are actually being played, right? And to do this is hard work, it's very tough work and difficult work. But once again, this is, it raises the other kind of question, which is that our responsibility? Because to a large extent, there is a significant investment in racism among the working class as well. A lot of white folks enjoy being racist, and that's a sad fact. They're not simply duped. They're also participants in that process. Because there were real tangible benefits to adopting the racist mindset. After Nathaniel Bacon's rebellion in 1676, I think there was a reference you made, when the Virginia statutes enforced new slave codes and so on. This is the first time you start seeing in these documents the use of the term white. Right? Prior to that, they were referring to Christians and Gentiles and so on and so forth, but now they become white. So it's this kind of false solidarity that gets established, but provided real tangible benefits to those folks defined as white. Right? So we've got to kind of take both into account. One is the duped character of things, but also the significant investment people put into these majoritarian ideologies.
Historically, capitalism has been used as a rather effective tool of dividing people and pitting one group against the other, and racism is one of those byproducts, although it has its own history outside of capitalism. When talking with Trump supporters, for instance, who say, "Oh, I'm not racist, I just believe this and this and this," most of the time if they have to say, "Oh, I'm not racist, I just believe this," it's usually as a reaction from someone saying, "Oh, you're racist because of that and that and that." It doesn't do much good, like you said, to ridicule them or just say you're racist. The more effective thing to do is to say, you're supporting a person whose policies are going to screw you over. And this is why you're going to be screwed. Give them a bullet point list. This policy, and that. It doesn't matter if what he ends up saying is, "Oh, we should build a wall, we should do this and this." If the person that says, even if they may hold problematic or just stupid beliefs, if they think that it's against their best interest to vote for someone that's going to enact those policies, they won't vote for him. If they see that they are going to get screwed over, and that the group that they're fighting against, minority populations or any these other groups, that they're going to get screwed over too, there's going to be some amount of solidarity with them. And so they'll say, "Hey, screw that guy, he's trying to make our lives worse." There is the possibility for solidarity between these groups. We just have to figure out how to tap into it. I do believe that people that hold these hateful views can be reformed. People change their minds over time, sometimes. Really, at the end of the day, it's working to make people's lives better. And the more we try and do that, the more we'll see that, oh, my neighbor isn't as bad as I think. maybe I shouldn't hate that group of people. They have the same struggles that I'm fighting against. And that the possibility to work together is far more productive than simply hating each other.
To point out the obvious, the majority of Americans did not vote for Donald Trump. It's a minority. I point out the obvious. One time in Asheville, I was a painter in an old folks' home. I'm a criminal defense lawyer now. Guns and drugs is my business, but back then I painted. And there was this right-wing woman there that was supposedly really evil. And everybody was like, oh yeah, Chris and her, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to be on. It was like they were just waiting for us to confront each other. And then one day, she was like 69, 70, pure evil too. And I found myself alone in the laundry room with her. And I'm just like, oh crap, here we go. And then I'm just like, I'm looking at her, and she looks like my grandma. She's a right-wing, the whole blah, blah. And I look at her and I say, I don't trust the government. She looks at me and goes, I don't trust the government. And I'm like, I think corporations control the government. They have too much power. And she goes, I think corporations have too much power and take over the government. And we talked about that for a while. I just hit her with mainline anarchist philosophy. And you know what I found out? We had a lot more in common than we had separate. Now don't get me wrong, there's some people that are just damn stupid and mean. You're not going to change their minds. That's where they're at. But in Newport, when the Ku Klux Klan came, their recruiters always had the bright, new, shiny SUVs. And the people they tried to recruit from were like me. Old camouflage, old pickup trucks, poor, feeling like they had no power, and they had these idiots coming to them and saying, there's a reason you're poor. You do have power. You're part of the master race. That's the draw. And I think we need to sort of sometimes occasion with people, put aside Democrat and Republican and all this bipolar bickering stuff that's just been set up. If I'd gone in there and said, I'm a Democrat, oh, it would have been over. She might have shot me right there. She was packing. I can guarantee it. But when I reached out to her, and finally, I was involved in the anti-strip mine campaigns, Mountain Justice Summer, the whole civil disobedience campaign, and we went door to door in every single community to the trailers where the coal miners lived, knocked on their door, and we talked to these people. And we found out, it was weird because we brought people from anarchists from Boston that had never been out of the city, were black, and were just like terrified of being out in the woods. And I remember one of them came up to me and he goes, they're having a barbecue. They're going to feed me deer meat. And they said they're collecting guns because they expect a revolution to come because they don't trust the government. And these urban anarchist activists found they had more in common with these rural people living in these exploited coal-filled communities than they did with the wealthy and powerful that are manipulating both sides. Don't get me wrong. There's some people out there that are just damn fools and they ain't never going to listen to common sense. But occasionally, we can get through to them. We can't get through to people. They're poor, they're struggling, they're fighting, they're being sold a bill of goods, and occasionally, if we can put down all of our labels, we can talk. Not always, but sometimes. And those conversations occasionally can be more interesting than the ones you have with the people that agree with you exactly in lockstep with what you think. And I think those are the conversations that we've got to have.
I'd like to ask you all to join me in thanking our panelists.
Oh, so you all know there's a right-wing media outlet, Christian. Anything you tell him, he's going to spin, he's pro-Nazi, he puts all this Nazi stuff on his page. So be very careful talking to him, okay? He interviewed Heimbach and he's a cheerleader. You're all fair warned, okay?
Same amount of custody.
Yeah.